Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another episode of PEM Rules, the Pediatric Emergency Medicine podcast. I'm your host, Yaron Ivan, as usual. And today I have a guest on the show whose skills can probably be very useful for many of us physicians. Today I'm going to have a discussion with Joshua Washington, who is actually a physician coach in Florida. He's someone that I've known for a few years, and he is someone that has helped me personally be a better communicator and do the right thing for my patient medically while communicating it better to the patient and the parent. All of us physicians, clinicians, especially in the field of pediatric emergency medicine or emergency medicine in general, have experienced sometimes, thankfully not all the time, the difficult patient. The times that you think you're doing everything right, you're trying to be polite and professional, and nothing seems to work. I thought it'd be a great idea to bring Josh to the show and discuss with him how do we approach the difficult patient. So, good morning, Josh. Thank you very, very much for coming on the show. I truly appreciate your time. Let me give me just a second to introduce you to the PEM Rules listeners. So, Josh is an organizational psychologist and physician coach. And please correct me if that title is wrong, Josh, right? Physician coach.
Perfect. Yeah, you got it.
And Josh has helped many physicians, myself included, be better at what they do. Josh is originally from a small village in Florida called, Josh, help me out with the pronunciation.
Immokalee.
Immokalee.
One of the greatest places on earth.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Went to college at the University of Central Florida, studying interpersonal and organizational communication before going to get his master's in organizational psychology. Josh has been a coach for over 8 years now. And if that's not enough, he's also an author. And I encourage you to check his first book, The Mentality of Success. Latest project is called Money Guide, right? For rich millennials. Is that right? That's another project of yours?
Yes. We're doing some things over in the money. I love investing in those kind of things. So yes.
Very nice. Welcome, Josh, to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. It's been a while since we got a chance to cross paths. So I was very happy to hear from you and come on the show and see if I can provide some value for your listeners.
So I thank you. And I personally think my listeners will greatly benefit from your wisdom, which is why you're here. My first question to you, Josh, is the question I ask all my guests on PEM Rules, and I'd love to hear your aspect or your approach to that question. What do you think makes a good pediatric EM doctor? In other words, a good PEM doctor is one who does what?
Great question. From my perspective and line of work, which is on the people side of medicine, I would say a good PEM understands that good communication breeds confidence. Good communication saves time, and good communication preserves energy, which I think is very big for an emergency medicine doctor. I think good communication, oftentimes, when I coach with doctors, one of their biggest fears is that what I'm teaching them is going to cause them to spend all day with a patient. And they're usually very happy to find out that it actually cuts their time in half. So I think those are three things that I would say makes a good PEM.
Very good. My second question to you, and this is really the focus of what I wanted to talk to you about. It seems that in the last few years, pediatric emergency medicine, as well as general emergency medicine, or even medicine in general, has really shifted a lot. And there's now a very, very big focus on patient satisfaction, or what's called patient experience. In my line of work, in the pediatric line of work, it really means parent satisfaction or parent experience.
Right.
We really get graded now for how happy or satisfied our patients are. And many of us PEM physicians struggle with this a little bit because sometimes what the child needs and what you think the child needs and what the parents actually want are very different. Great classic example. A lot of parents want antibiotic for fever. You know the fever is from a virus and antibiotics is not indicated. And that starts a very difficult situation. What advice do you have for us PEM doctors to help us be better in communication and better relate to the parents and do a better job explaining that the child is going to be okay, doesn't need antibiotics, etc.? I personally have some of my own communication rules I'll share with you after, but what advice would you have for us?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. Let's start with like the fundamentals, right? And I just for those who are listening and you don't know me, just a little bit of context. I worked for one of the largest healthcare systems in the country. We're talking over like 4,000 doctors and like the patient experience, the corporate side of patient experience. But I didn't come from healthcare. So when I came to this situation and challenge, I really approached it with a curious mind. And so when I began coaching doctors, I always asked them a very important question when we first started. And it was, hey, what is the most important thing that you want a patient to leave an interaction with you saying about their experience? And you want to guess what the number one answer was for every doctor? Just about every doctor asked this question to.
Sure.
The number one answer was confidence. I want patients to feel like I know what I'm talking about as a doctor, which makes sense because doctors, their mindsets are very much scientifically driven. Facts, figures, truth or not true, but what I had to explain to a lot of the doctors, and I think where a lot of the context gets missed is patients aren't looking for your clinical competence. They can't measure that. They cannot measure your clinical competence. And so they're at a disadvantage. So what do they revert to instead? They measure your ability to communicate your competence in a way that builds confidence. So what does that mean? That means the issue is not about your competence, it's about trust. And so oftentimes I encourage doctors, especially when it's an angry parent, we know some of the basic fundamentals are if the parent feels like you are listening to what they're saying and you understand what their fears are, and I think you should take it even further. You want to like verbally acknowledge those fears. Or mom, it sounds like you're a little bit frustrated. Or mom, it sounds like this scares you a little bit. Tell me a little bit of why. And when you can get to the foundation of what's driving the emotion, because that's usually what ruptures the experience is the negative emotion in the room. And so I always encourage and equip doctors to be able to extract that emotion so we can talk about it, allow it to air out. And then there's trust now because he or she feels understood. And now you can move on to the competence portion. So I'll pause there because I know you have some good stuff too, doctor.
No, this is excellent advice. And again, I can tell you as a physician, as a PEM physician, I've been in that situation many times, and it's those kind of advice that kind of help me out, be a better communicator and set the stage for better care. So I love that. My next question to you is, I have some of my own rules for communication, and I'd love to know what you think about them, and maybe you can sharpen them for us. So my PEM rules, rule number 52, don't tell parents what you want, tell them what you need. So don't tell people what you want, tell them what you need. And PEM rule number 63 that I have, parents, families need to know three things upon discharge from the ED. What is the problem, what to do for the problem, and what to come back for. So what do you think about those two rules of mine?
Okay, let's start with the first one. Don't tell them what was the first one. Tell them what you need, not
Don't
what
tell people what you want, tell them what you need.
I will say that is a good rule, but I want to give it a little bit more. I want to enhance it a bit. I would say find out what people need. Find out what they need so that you can talk about what they want. And what do I mean by that? Oftentimes, the needs are what really drive um, distance in relationships. And in medicine and life, it doesn't matter. We're talking about relationships because that's what it all boils down to. So when you can identify what the patient needs, and you can do it by simply asking, what are they looking to accomplish? What would they like to see? And doctors kind of cringe when they hear this because it comes across as concierge medicine. But you're not asking what they need so that you can actually supply that. You're asking so you can pull all the data in. And then when you're giving the competence, when you're connected and trying to explain why you're doing what you're doing, you're keeping in mind what that need was so that you don't make the patient feel like they're not heard. I saw a therapist once and she said, "Hey, do you want to be right or do you want to be in a relationship?" And that's often what it boils down to when you're talking to patients. You can be right later, but right now focus on the relationship. What was the second one again?
Parents, families need to know three things upon discharge from the ED. What is the problem, what to do for the problem, and what to come back for.
I love that because here's what I usually teach. I'll coach a doctor. I'll give you all a freebie here today. One of the things I do to kind of keep it fun and light, but also to accomplish those three things that you just mentioned, I'll tell the doctor to give the patient like a pop quiz at the end of the visit. And you can say, hey, Mr. Johnson, we're going to do a quick fun pop quiz. I want you to tell me what's our plan. Or to your point, those three things. What was the problem? What was the second one?
What to do for the problem,
What
what
to
to
do
come
for the
back for.
problem, and what and the third one, and ask them, like, sit back and let the patient tell you the answers to those questions. That gives you an opportunity to clear up any misconceptions or any miscommunications, and it also helps with the outcomes, making sure that the patient feels confident that they know the plan of care and they're actually going to go out and execute it, which we know is a struggle oftentimes when we're dealing with humans.
Very good. No, again, a great advice, Josh. At the risk of having you repeat some of what you said, I'm going to ask you specifically. So, again, I've employed many of the communication skills you gave me, and I got to say, most of the time, I'm successful in having a good relationship with the parent and the patient. But every once in a while, despite my very best efforts, it feels like a losing battle. The mother is upset, yelling, and I can't seem to work around it. Any advice you have for us PEM physicians with dealing with this particularly exceptionally challenging situation or difficult parents or patients?
Man, this is such a great question because I think this is where I, from my experience coaching doctors, that they get hung up the most. One time I was working with a primary care physician, and we were running late into the next visit. We were running late because this doctor actually went into the schedule and made room for a patient that was late or couldn't make it. So made an exception, right? Went into that room, had a bad experience, and now was running late to the next patient, and felt really like deterred about it. Felt really distraught about it. And so we stopped for a second after that visit, and I had this conversation with the doctor just to explain, hey, you got to give yourself some grace. There is no one on earth that gets every interaction right. And you, as a doctor, you're not going to get every interaction right. So, what would I say when you're having that patient that's just, you could give them the cure to cancer and they'd be like, not good enough? You have to give yourself grace and just let that one go. Don't beat yourself up. It doesn't mean you're not competent enough. It doesn't mean your communication skills aren't high enough. It may mean that patient is not at a place of awareness or at a place where they can even receive any productive communication. And so sometimes you just have to take that L and take that loss and move on. And I think that's something that's hard oftentimes for doctors to accept because it feels like a failure, and it is a failure, but it's not the end. It's not the all be in, because you will have other opportunities to, recover and recover successfully. But some of them you will not recover successfully, and that's okay.
All right, that's very good. I agree with you. The way I explain it to my residents and my trainees is, if you went to college or grad school or even med school or any environment you'll be, an A minus is really okay, or a B plus is okay. So if I'm successful in 90% of my interactions, which is an A minus, I think that's okay. So I agree with you. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, it's definitely okay. And I think I have to say this too. A part of it is a lot of the systems and administrative partners that doctors are partnered with sometimes can add the pressure and the constraints that make a doctor feel like they have to get every interaction right. And I think one of the most satisfying and freeing things is when we sit down and we look at the data and I show them, hey, we're not measuring perfection here. We want to measure your habits and get these communication techniques into your daily, and the numbers will play out in your favor at the end. So what you're saying, you'll get 90 to 95% of these right. And that is what we're aiming for.
All right. So again, thank you for saying that and helping us physicians feel better about those situations. But again, because you're here and you are a super communicator, give us some practical advice in dealing with those parents who are just, you can't have it.
Yeah, absolutely. Something I created And through my work over these years, I want to give people a method they can use. So if you're listening and you have the opportunity to, I want you to write something down. I came up with a method called micro conversations, which just simply means that each conversation we have leads to a bigger goal, right? The bigger relational goal. So the micro is an acronym. The M stands for mood. Anytime you're walking into a conversation, you want to, whether it's at work or out of work, right? This works. You want to check your mood first. You want to make sure that you are in a what I call sober mind. And if anyone's ever drank a few drinks, you know when we're not in our sober mind, we don't really have sober thoughts, right? Our actions, our emotions can be a little bit more fluid. We can be triggered a little bit more easier. So you want to just make sure your emotions are sober. Maybe you had a long day on the floor, in the emergency room, and you might just need to take a second before you go into this next visit because your emotions are a little bit up and you might be a little bit on edge. So M is mood. You want to check your mood first. And if that is sober, going into the room, you always want to take just kind of a mental note of what's the mood of the patient and in the room. Because whatever that mood is, I don't care how competent you are, you're not going to get to the practical agenda until you address that mood. So if the mood is fear, if the mood is anger, if they've been waiting, for a long time and they're anxious, maybe the mood is anxious, you want to address that first and then move on to the next thing. And so that's the M, mood. The next one is I. You always want to measure or state your intent, right? Because most times you don't know the patient, they don't know you. Even though you are a well-established doctor, the world we live in today, it's a good idea to walk in and say, hey, here's my intent. Here's what I'm intending to do. And that intent needs to always be connected to the good of the patient, okay? You don't lie, don't be unethical, but make sure it's connected to the good. Even if it's, hey, I want you to leave here tonight with a solution to this. That's my intent. Doesn't mean you will leave, but that's my intent. The second half of that is impact. We don't have time to talk about that today. But intent, and then the C there is challenge, right? We're spelling micro. The C is challenge. If there's a challenge that comes up, or you say, hey, here's my intent, right? I want you to leave here with this outcome, but here's the challenge. We have this thing. And that's where you can bring up, let's say that, like you mentioned an example earlier where there's a fever and they want antibiotics for it, but that's not going to work. You can say, hey, my intent is for that child to leave here without a fever, but here's the challenge. Antibiotics isn't going to solve this, right? So now you're working through, you've worked through those 3 steps. And then the last 2 are results and options. You want to make sure that when it comes to the results, that you are clear on what to expect. Keeping expectations tempered so that there's no gray areas for anyone to make assumptions, because where there are areas for gray, people make assumptions, right? And if you can't give results, you want to refer to options. You want to give them, hey, here's 2 to 3 things that we can do. That makes the patient feel like they have a sense of ownership, a sense of autonomy, they have a sense of control, but you're giving them 2 to 3 options that you know are based on your best clinical and your best competence for what can get them to the solution they desire. So that's kind of a step process that we kind of coach through to help them get into the habits of using that when they walk into the exam room. Hopefully that helps.
No, that's excellent. So the micro conversation method, mood, intent, challenge, results, and options. Very good. Excellent. Josh, these were really, really great advice. I truly appreciate you coming on the show. Again, us pediatric providers, pediatric emergency providers, every once in a while struggle with not having as good communication skills as we would like. So those advice are certainly great. I appreciate you coming on the show. And if you like what you heard, please check out Josh's book, The Mentality of Success, to get more advice and hopefully even improve your communication skills even more. Lastly, Josh, I have a custom on the show. Every guest get to choose their outro. And I guess you wanted to hear Shining Star by Earth, Wind, and Fire. Is that right? Tell me about Earth, Wind, and Fire. I got to be honest, not very familiar.
Oh, man. Are you serious? Earth, Wind, and Fire. That's that. Listen, if you're not familiar, then after today, this is going to be between. You love to play, so you're going to love this.
I guess I'm going to have to learn Shining Star by Earth, Wind, and Fire, especially for you, Josh. Especially for you.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show. Truly appreciate it and truly appreciate those good advice.
Thank you for having me.
And that is it for today, guys. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Josh, for your skills and your wisdom. Certainly very useful tools for us clinicians, those of us who have to deal with the difficult patient, luckily just some of the time. Again, thank you for listening to PEM Rules. Thank you for supporting the podcast and the website. Please continue to communicate right back. If there's anything you want to hear about, if there's any guest you think that I can benefit from having on the show and you can benefit from listening to, please let me know. You can contact me through the website, through the Facebook page, whatever works for you. Thanks again for listening. The following outro is Josh's request. Great song by Earth, Wind, and Fire called Shining Star. Gotta be honest, never heard of it, but thank you, Josh, for introducing me. Great music, great guitar line, great bass line also. Thanks again and have a great day.